When you have a GOAT debate for most sports, you're comparing players across different eras. But in episode 17 of the What's Cooking podcast, we find that tennis has a GOAT debate of players within the same era. All three of these guys are recent players, and I'm going to break it down.
Here we go.
What's Cooking, episode 17. Welcome back. Glad to have you. The seasons, they are a-changin', and things are getting cold here in Iowa. The snow is starting to fall. Gotta get the ice scraper ready in the morning. It's getting to be winter time, and I gotta adjust because it was literally last week when I was sitting outside eating lunch in the 70-degree weather. That was last Wednesday. And today, we are looking at a high of around 32 degrees. So life comes at you fast, man. Iowa weather has no mercy. You better be ready whether you like it or not. And that's all I got to say, man. It's getting to be that time, November. Thanksgiving rolling around soon, so anyway, this is not a weather podcast. This is a sports, finance, technology, and video games podcast. So, with that being said, we're going to get into today's topic, which is the GOAT debate, but not the GOAT debate you're probably thinking of. Today's GOAT debate is going to be the tennis GOAT debate. Looking at men's tennis, specifically men's singles tennis, I don't think you have a lot of doubles players getting mentioned in the GOAT debate for tennis. So we're going to be looking at which tennis player is considered the greatest of all time. I think that this is really a three-horse race because even though tennis has a nice history with a lot of great players, past and present, there's three players that have really separated themselves from the pack. And I think you all know who I'm talking about. That is Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and Novak Djokovic. These three guys are the top three as far as total majors won. And they are all recently active. Actually, Federer just retired this year, so tough to see him go, but I think that his best days were definitely behind him, and he's going to be leaving to retirement with a healthy body and a long life left to live, so he's going to be with his kids, and good times are ahead for him. But we still have Rafa and Novak, active tennis players. They can continue to add to their legacy, but Federer looks like his stats are all calculated, and we know what kind of body of work we have with him. Before I dive into the compare and contrast and analysis between these three guys, we need to start off by paying homage to the GOATs of the past, the players that were once considered the greatest before these three guys arrived. And it's very possible that I'm leaving some important people out here, but I'm just going off the top of my head. So from what I remember in the history of tennis, way back in the day, you had Rod Laver, who was very important. He won a lot of tournaments and was super successful, and they actually have the Laver Cup named after him, which is kind of a fun country versus country, world versus Europe type of event. So he's obviously a huge player in the history of tennis. Then you also have Arthur Ashe. Arthur Ashe, the first African-American to ever win a major in tennis. Definitely groundbreaking athlete. They have the ESPYs award named after him for courage, and he was a tremendous athlete and person. So those two guys, you have to pay your respects. Then we have a little more recent day, but still in the past, some guys like Bjorn Borg, Jimmy Connors, John McEnroe, Pete Sampras, Andre Agassi, some of those guys. I don't really have a whole lot to tell you about these guys. I think Pete Sampras was an American, which is probably one of the best American players we've had. We had Andy Roddick for a while, but he is no longer active, I don't believe. So we're kind of hurting for an American star to take the reins here. But Pete Sampras used to be super good. John McEnroe as well. He's now a commentator. That's how I know him, as a commentator. He's always saying funny things, and I think they pull up some clips of him like talking trash and getting angry back in the day. But that's about the extent of my history of tennis knowledge. I think it's important to mention those guys because obviously before the current big three, those were the guys that kind of ran the show and they dominated in their respective eras. So with that being said, we now need to get into the GOAT debate of tennis. Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, Novak Djokovic. I have some stats compiled for each of them. I'm going to give some personal memories, what I remember the most about them, how I would describe them, their play style, all that good stuff, what kind of surfaces they're best at, how the fans view them, and maybe that'll contribute to how they stack up in the GOAT debate. Let's start with the man from Switzerland, the man with a one-handed backhand, the man with the Rolex sponsorship, with the Nike partnership for a long time, Roger Federer. He came onto the scene in the late 90s. I think he turned pro right around 2000, maybe late 90s, early 2000s. This man was a specimen when he took over. He had all the tools that you needed to make it to the top of the tennis game. That swooping one-handed backhand is just kind of the signature Federer. You don't really see any other player as graceful and just as effortless as what Roger Federer can kind of glide around the tennis court and makes it look so easy. And he had some power in his forehand in his prime, and he could move really well. And this guy could really just do it all. Another signature Federer move is the backhand drop shot. He could just put so much spin on these backhands, and they would barely fall over the net, and it would land right next to the line and spin and just die right where it landed. And it's so impossible to see that coming as an opponent. And if you do somehow notice it, you still have very little chance of making it up to the net in time. And then you have to somehow get under the ball, scoop it up over the net. And even if you manage to do every single one of those things, Roger's probably right there in position to put it back and put it away. So he knew all the angles. He knew how to put himself in position to succeed. And probably my favorite thing about Federer is just his level-headedness and his mental toughness. You never see Federer lose his cool. You never see him freaking out and just kind of going off on the officials or throwing his racket around and pouting. This guy is just a true professional. He's going to go about his business. He's going to hold himself accountable, not blame others. And the amount of times I've seen Federer get down early and other players would just call it quits. They would say, you know what? I'm down 2 sets against a really good opponent. There's no chance I'm coming back in this thing. And they just mentally check out. But Federer, with the mental toughness that this guy has, he would be able to play like it's 0-0 at any point in the match. And it could be the most pressure situation, game on the line, match point in the finals, and you wouldn't be able to tell because he's just so level-headed. And I feel like there's so many tennis players that should use him as an example of what they're trying to become because he played the game the way you would want it to be played. He left the tennis world in a better place, and he's a perfect role model, in my opinion, for anyone looking to get into the professional tennis scene. But aside from his personality and his play style. I want to talk a little bit about some of his achievements. We're going to look at chronologically here. So the first major Federer ever won, I believe, was the Wimbledon in 2003. That was kind of his breakthrough moment. And once he broke through, he did not look back. Let me tell you something. This guy won the Wimbledon in 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007. That's a 5-peat. Then, in those same years, except for 2003, he won the U.S. Open in 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008. That's another 5-peat in a different major. Whew. My goodness. The end of the 2000s, early 2010s, I would say more of mid to end of 2000s, probably Roger's prime. He won the Australian Open 2004, 2006, 2007, 2010. So this guy was really just dialed in at the end of the 2000s. But the one monkey on his back, the one thing that Federer haters will get him for, the French Open. He only has one French Open title, and that's in 2009. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was when Rafael Nadal was not in the final. So that probably helped Federer get that French Open championship. We'll get into Rafa and some of his dominance at the French later on, but that's the monkey on Roger's back, is the French Open. He's only got one, and thankfully he did get one, because it could have been a lot worse if he never did get that one. There would have been a huge hole in his resume. But other than that, I want to talk about his dominance on grass and on hard court. You really associate Roger with grass because his Wimbledon titles are the most of any player ever. He has 8 Wimbledons. The next closest is Djokovic with 7. So he is the king of grass, Roger, and he was excellent on hard court as well. Another thing Federer has in his favor is the fans, the way the fans view him, the way the fans love him. There is an award called the ATP Fan Favorite Award that's awarded every year to online voted fans voting who their favorite player is. Roger Federer has won this award every single year since 2003. That's 19 times in a row he's won the Fan Favorite Award out of all tennis players. So you can say what you want about these other two guys and how they are better in some areas, but there's something to be said about the 19 in a row fan favorite voting that Roger Federer has. He is a man of the people. He is the people's champ. But as you know, his career has now come to an end. And there's some things that I noticed as Federer was kind of on the decline. He was starting to rack up some injuries. His mobility was not quite what it once was. And I noticed that Federer was starting to have some troubles with unforced errors. He would have these open shots where he would just kind of place them in bad spots and struggle to strike the ball as clean as he once did. So it was a little frustrating to see that, but we remember Roger as his peak form shows. So keep that in mind as we go forward. But I expect the same thing to happen with Nadal and Djokovic as they reach the end of their careers. It's just so happens that Federer has already reached that point. So let's go ahead and move on over to Rafael Nadal, the man from Spain, the left-handed tennis player. This guy is probably the shortest of the three, I believe he is, but he might be the best physical athlete of the three. He is strong. He can run like the wind. And this guy is unbelievable to watch. If you're choosing a tennis player based on the energy that they bring to the match, there's no question you're taking Nadal. This man in the pregame tunnel walking out, you can see him jumping up and down and stretching, and he's just got the game face on. When you go to the opening coin toss or whatever they call it in tennis, I don't know exactly what you call it, but you decide who's going to serve first. Nadal hears the decision. He'll do his little sprint from the net back to the baseline. He's running around. My man, when he gets over to the bench, he's got to get his water bottles organized. He has this really strict rule with himself where all the water bottles have to be facing a certain direction and they have to be rotated to a certain degree and they have to be placed in the right spot, and he can't step on any lines on the court when he's walking out. And his pre-serve routine is you got to fix your shorts and then put your hand around your ear and then do 17 different things. And every single time he does the serve, it's the same way. And he's just so meticulous about his little routines. And every time he hits the ball, it's just this huge sound that he makes, this huge grunt. And man, there's no question when you're watching Nadal play that he is given 100% effort. There is no more energy that he could put into the sport of tennis than what Nadal does. And as a person who appreciates the grind and the hustle that's required to play sports, you really love to see that, because you don't want players coming out and just kind of going through the motions and stuff. You want to see the passion and the fire that's lit inside of these guys. And that's what I'll always remember Nadal for, because my man had no chill, but in a good way. Nadal broke onto the scene shortly after Federer. His first major victory was in the French Open in 2005. So pretty similar timeline to Roger. Once he won this French Open, guys, my man went on a historic run at the French Open. He won it in 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008. That's a four-peat right there. Didn't win it in 2009 because that's when Federer won. Then 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14. That's another five-peat. So a four-peat off year, five-peat. And then 17, 18, 19, 20. That's another four-peat. So four-peat off a year, five-peat off 2 years, and then four-peat. So, yeah, you would agree that this man is not to be messed with at the French Open. He's won the French Open 14 times. I'm fairly certain that that's the most that anyone has won a single major. And mostly this is seen as a positive for Rafa. But when you look at legacy, you might also kind of see this as a negative, because he hasn't had as much success at some of the other majors. If you have 14 major victories at the French Open, you would expect him to be far and away the greatest, because obviously if he's that good, he could win at the other tournaments too. He only has 2 Australian victories. He only has 2 Wimbledon victories. And then he does have 4 victories at the U.S. Open. But yeah, the main bread and butter for Nadal is going to be stepping onto the clay court at the French and getting things done. On the clay, you can slide around more than other surfaces. So hard court, you're not really going to be able to slide much at all. Grass, not really much. But that clay, you get out there, you run in to get a ball, and you plant your foot, you're sliding around, man. You got to be able to control your body weight and change direction quickly. And that's just something that Nadal's been excellent at, and no one's really been able to rival him. But you'll get into this a little bit later. There's only been a select few that have gotten a victory over Rafa at the French. And one of those came in 2021 when Novak Djokovic took him down in the French Open semis on his way to win the 2021 French Open. So pretty crazy that Djokovic was able to do that. during one of Rafa's crazy streaks. But yeah, that's pretty impressive. Obviously, when you're talking about Rafa Nadal, one of the first things you notice when you're watching him play is that he's left-handed. And this is a big difference for a lot of players. Usually you want to attack a tennis player by hitting it at their backhand, and you have all these strategy points that you're trying to find their weaknesses in certain areas. All of that has to flip and go in the exact opposite direction when you're playing against a left-handed player. What would be their backhand is now their forehand. What would be one side is now the other side. And you kind of have to change your whole approach at that point. So it's really a unique, some might say it's an advantage because it's rare and other players have to account for that difference. Some might say it's a disadvantage because tennis was dominated mostly by right-handed players because obviously more people in the world are right-handed. But either way, he's crazy impressive, and the fans do like Nadal. Not quite as much as Federer, as you would know by the award, but Nadal and Federer have always had a great relationship. They kind of have this friendship / bromance in tennis. A lot of funny interviews with them talking to each other and joking around, and you always love to see Federer versus Nadal. It's like Brady versus Manning back in the day. It's just one of the great matchups that you will ever see in the sport. And a lot of times Rafa would win, a lot of times Federer would win. They would have some crazy 5-set matches in the finals and everything. But after every match and at the end of the day, they're really good friends and they want to see each other succeed. So it's really cool to kind of grow up in this era where you see some of the greatest of all time all playing at the same point with each other and kind of appreciating each other's success. Some of the Rafa Nadal moments that stick out to me, one of them is the 2009 Wimbledon, I think it was. Maybe it was 2008. It's 2008 Wimbledon. He played against Federer in the final. It was a 5-setter, and it finished in like the dark. It was so late because they've been playing for so long, and Rafa barely squeaked it out over Federer. And the camera flashes taking pictures of Rafa when he's holding the trophy, and it was in dark, so it was looking like it was like lightning or something. But that whole match was insane. That 5-setter between two of the greats. And then this is kind of a smaller weird thing that I remember, but I think this was the final of Australian Open 2017, maybe. It was Federer and Nadal in the final. Federer had supposedly won on this match point, but Nadal challenged it on a match point. And Federer started to celebrate, and then he realized that Rafa challenged it, and they had to wait a little bit. And the camera goes over to Rafa when he challenges this point, and you see the look on his face. He just kind of shrugs. He's like, "Well, this is all I can do. I don't care if I lose, I lose. If I get the challenge, I'm still playing." Like, he just gives a little shrug of, "All right, well," I can't even describe it, but you guys have to look it up. It's just funny moments that I'll remember for Rafa. All of his funny little tweaks and pre-game rituals and everything. He's so unique, and really glad to grow up watching him as well as these other guys. But now we need to get into some Novak Djokovic GOAT debate discussions. He is the third player on this list and probably my least favorite of the three, mostly because he always stood in the way of Roger and Rafa getting more championships than they would have. Djokovic won his first major in 2008. That came at the Australian Open. So he kind of came onto the scene the latest of the three. And Djokovic, personality-wise, he's not like Roger and he's not like Rafa in the sense that he can get a little controversial sometimes. He can get a little feisty. He's not really a fan favorite by any means. It seems like when he's playing in the majors against Rafa, the crowd is going for Rafa. When he's playing in the majors against Federer, the crowd's going for Federer. There's even times when he's going against Andy Murray or some other player, and the crowd's with the other guy. So it's kind of tough seeing Djokovic. He's just known as like the enemy of the other two guys. But I have to hand it to him because Djokovic has been so solid and so balanced of a player. This guy has so little weaknesses in his game. And he's a little similar to Federer in the sense that his mental toughness and his will to succeed is just unmatched. I mean, he'll be down 2 sets, he'll be down game point for the other player, and it's just like there's no pressure. It's just like it's a random Tuesday practice for them. They can go out there and just be level-headed, and Djokovic is one of the best at this. He can just flip a switch, lock in, and pretend like it's no big deal. So I've watched Djokovic time and time again deny Federer of more Wimbledons, deny Rafa of a French Open, and really just stand in the way of what the fans want to see. And it's frustrating, but I have to respect it. As far as his distribution of majors won, most of his action, most of his success is going to come from the Australian Open and the Wimbledon. He has 9 Australian Opens and 7 Wimbledons. That's pretty impressive, guys. He also has 2 French Opens and 3 U.S. Opens. We think of Djokovic as mostly a hard court player, but also he can do some great things on grass. I mean, the guy does not have many weaknesses, like I said. The only thing really haunting him is some of the controversy and I guess some of the antics and stuff that he's had. There was a time when Djokovic was just trying to discard a ball, kind of hit it back towards the back line, towards some of the ball boys or ball girls, and he kind of turned and hit the ball all in one motion without really looking where it was going, and somehow this ball went perfectly at the throat of one of the line judges, and it knocked her down, and she was like having trouble breathing, and I think Djokovic ended up getting disqualified from the entire tournament for that. Obviously, I don't think he intended to do that, but I mean, you can be a little more intentional. You can be a little more accurate with where you're hitting the ball towards the ball kids. So a little bit reckless there. There's also been plenty of times where Djokovic has repeatedly slammed his rackets and kind of thrown a fit. There's also during COVID, he had a big old fiasco about getting vaccinated and willing to kind of sit out different tournaments to not be vaccinated. And I'm not going to really go deep into that, but it just seems like there's always a controversy somewhere in Djokovic's career, whereas Nadal and Federer didn't really have that much. So maybe that's something that would deter you from going with Djokovic, but it's just something that is the unfortunate reality, and we have to kind of consider that. So between the three, let's talk numbers. Roger Federer, 20 major championship victories. Novak Djokovic, 21 major championship victories, but he's still active. Rafael Nadal, 22 major championship victories, and he's still active. So Federer is pretty much locked in at 20. That's incredible. That used to be the record until Nadal and Djokovic passed him, I believe. Nadal and Djokovic have plenty of opportunities coming up to extend these totals. I think you can pretty much lock in Nadal as a French Open champion as long as he's healthy and as long as he's prepared and ready to go. That's almost a guarantee over the years that Rafa can get about a French Open every year to add to his total. I think Djokovic, it's tough because he's been held out of some of these majors for being unvaccinated. So maybe that's affecting his legacy because he's not in these tournaments that he could have won. Maybe he could have been past Nadal at this point. But I think Djokovic is a lock for at least one major a year going forward, if not two or more. The dude is just unbelievable. The mental toughness and the balanced player that he is, it's bound to happen that he's going to add to that 21 major total. So if you want to solely base it on majors, maybe Federer is third on your list. Nadal would currently be first, Djokovic would be second. But let's go look at some of the head-to-head records between these guys because that's super important as well. When you look at Djokovic versus Federer, head-to-head all time, they've played each other 50 times with a record favoring Djokovic 27-23. And in the finals, they've played each other 19 times, where the record also favors Djokovic 13-6. Now, when I say this, you do have to remember that Djokovic came onto the scene later in Federer's career, where a lot of these games were being played after Federer's prime and as Djokovic is entering his prime. So who knows if they had the same prime at the same time, things could have been different. If Federer was entering his prime as Djokovic was not in his prime, that could easily be the other way around. How about we look at Federer and Nadal head-to-head matchup? Well, we have Nadal leading Federer 24-16 in the overall count. And then in finals, we have Nadal also leading Federer 14-10. These guys did have a similar prime as far as when they started their careers and when they ended. I think that it's fair to say they were evenly matched for most of their prime. Seems like Nadal has a slight edge, but I think that one's a little more fair than the Djokovic-Federer comparison. But the last one we're going to look at is Djokovic-Nadal head-to-head. This one is super close. Djokovic leads Nadal 30-29 in overall matchups, and in finals, it's Djokovic leading 15-13. So if you noticed in those three comparisons, Djokovic has the head-to-head in every situation over both of these guys. But again, I need to reiterate that Djokovic had his prime later in the other two guys' primes. So he's a little bit offset, whereas Nadal and Federer peaked a little earlier in the timeline. Djokovic is peaking a little bit later, and that needs to be considered. So we've sliced and we've diced the data, and we've looked at past and present and personality and numbers and all this good stuff. What's the final verdict, you're asking? Well, I don't think you can definitively announce a GOAT between these three today. Obviously, two of them are still playing. Things are yet to be determined at the end of their careers. There could be different numbers. There could be different outcomes than what we have today. So keep that in mind. But I think that there's a quote from John McEnroe that I saw somewhere. And this is kind of a cop-out to say this, but he said that Federer is the greatest grass court player of all time, Nadal is the greatest clay court player of all time, and Djokovic is the greatest hard court player of all time. I think that that's fair to say, but he didn't really give an overall champion or GOAT, so I can't really end on that. Let's look at it this way. If the world ended today, who is the GOAT? Now, Nadal has the lead in overall majors won, and what I think helps Nadal is that he has a winning record over Federer overall and in finals. And Nadal's prime is in pretty much the same point as Federer's prime. So at their best, head-to-head, the numbers say that Nadal takes it over Federer. But then Djokovic comes in, and Nadal is still winning Frenches, and he's still winning other tournaments with Djokovic there. So I think if the world ended today and both Djokovic and Nadal never step foot on a court again, you could say that Nadal is the GOAT. He has the most majors. He has the head-to-head on Federer, and he was simply unstoppable at the French Open in a way that no player has ever done at a single tournament before. But now let's take it from another angle. Let's suppose that the world doesn't end today. I like to think that that'll be the case. These two players, Djokovic and Nadal, they continue their career, and let's project what we think will happen as they end their career. I think Djokovic has more time left than Nadal. I think Djokovic is more balanced of a player than Nadal. He can win on various surfaces, whereas Nadal hasn't shown as much success outside of the clay court. And that leads me to believe that when this puppy is all said and done, Djokovic will likely be leading the major count. Djokovic will have the head-to-head on Federer. He will most likely maintain the head-to-head on Nadal. He'll have a balanced resume of wins at different tournaments, at different times, and he will have pretty much all you need to be considered the GOAT. So, going forward, if I were to project the future based on the past, and if we let the careers of Djokovic and Nadal play out, my best bet is that Djokovic, when it's all said and done, is going to have the resume to be considered the GOAT. So, as much as it pains me to say it, as much as the fans most likely would not want that to be the case, I really do think that Djokovic has so much time left, and he's so balanced and well-rounded, and I think it's inevitable that he will end as the GOAT between these three. But there's one last viewpoint that I want to take, and that is which player burned the hottest, as they say. Which player at their absolute best would be the hardest to beat. And I think you have to look back at that stretch Roger Federer had in the late 2000s when he was routinely winning Wimbledon year in, year out, US Open year in, year out, Australian Open year in, year out, and he was able to grab himself a French Open along the way. I think that Federer stretch from about 04 to 09 is probably the best performance in the stretch that we've ever seen from any tennis player ever. And I think that if you wanted to take one tennis player at one point in their career, you have no choice but to take late 2000s Federer. The guy was just walking on water. He could not be taken down. And I have so many vivid memories of watching prime Federer get the job done routinely, and I have to agree with the fans, the ATP fan favorite vote. I'm a huge Federer fan. I just have to throw that in there. I think he's my personal GOAT, and the scenario that I just gave you, GOAT. But hopefully you guys were able to get a little more insight into the tennis world and draw your own conclusions from these arguments. Like I said, if I were to project for the future, I think Djokovic will end up the GOAT. If the world ended today, I think you could make a case for Nadal being the GOAT. Or if you wanted to pick one player from one point in their career to win you a tennis match, it's got to be Federer in the late 2000s. Also, My biased opinion is that I love Federer the most, so I have to choose him. But I know I'm giving you guys a lot of different answers, but I think if you wanted me to choose one player to be considered the GOAT, at the end of the day, when their careers are over, it will be Djokovic. And it's painful to say it, but I have to speak the truth, and that's what I am concluding. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the GOAT debate of tennis. We're going to send you on over to see what is cooking in each of the categories. What's cooking in sports? Holy moly, boys. We have a loaded What's Cooking segment today, so buckle up because, my goodness, this is going to be an adventure. Usually in sports, I will start with the Iowa football game, but this week is special because before the Iowa football game, we had the Iowa football managers playing against the Wisconsin football managers in what is known as the toolbox game. The winner of this matchup gets a trophy, which is a toolbox, and it's a tradition that's been going on for a long time between the managers of these two teams. They play a game of flag football in the indoor practice facility. And I don't know if you guys knew, but I listened to a podcast that talks about Iowa football. It's called Washed Up Walk-Ons. It's created by a couple of former players that used to play for Iowa, and now they talk about current Iowa players and former teammates and everything. They set up a little table and chair booth type of thing where they were selling some merch for their podcast and interacting with the guests and everything. And the toolbox game was open to the public, so there were fans there. We got to talk with other Hawkeye fans. We got to see some of the Wisconsin football manager parents showing up, cheering on their kids and everything. The atmosphere was pretty cool. I don't think the toolbox game had been open to the general public like this before, at least not to my knowledge. I went in there and just started talking to random Hawkeye fans, bonding over this cool tradition, and got a picture with some of the guys from Washed Up Walk-Ons. We got to watch the Hawks take down the Badgers in dominating fashion. The first touchdown of the game was scored by Wisconsin, and then the Hawks flipped a switch. We were scoring, and we were playing defense, and we would not look back. It was lit, too. This isn't just like the actual Iowa Hawkeye football team where the offense is limited and you're going to grind it out in defense. The football manager flag football Hawkeyes, they had some creativity on the offensive end. They had some high-flying touchdowns. We saw a hook and ladder play for a long touchdown. We saw a Philly special call. We saw some pick sixes. We saw a deep ball that was caught with one hand. We had kids mossing dudes. It was just a great all-around event, and the Hawks got the job done. I got to shout out my boy Brock, who was a former intern alongside when I had my internship, not last summer, but the summer before. He was quarterback for Iowa. He was getting it done. And also got to shout out number 11. Some guy named not named, but wearing number 11 was an absolute stud. This dude was making crazy catches, running around, playing defense and everything. It was an electric atmosphere, and I'm really glad that I was part of it. And then, after that, the next day, I was fortunate enough to receive some tickets from some relatives that were not attending the game. So me and my brother got to throw on 17 layers and kind of tough it out there in the cold and the low 30s, upper 20s degree weather. Went out and watched the Hawks take on Wisconsin. This one was low scoring as expected, but the Hawks creating some turnovers, playing some defense, doing their usual thing. Cooper DeJean contributing with a pick six, also some great punt returns, some tackles. The dude can do it all. Hawks, not a whole lot to show on offense as usual, but we were able to weather the storm, and we were able to get the job done against Wisconsin. The Bull stays home. Well, not stays home, and actually returns home. The trophy between Iowa and Wisconsin, the heart the Heartland Trophy. It's a bull is the trophy, but that's going to be staying home with the boys, the Hawks. So we love to see that. Good time was had by all. The fingers were a little bit frozen towards the end, but you know what? You tough it out for the Hawks. Let's head over to the NFL, where we see the Chargers JV team playing in prime time. And I say JV team because the Chargers are suffering with so many injuries to our starters. Our offense, we have wide receiver 1, 2, and 3 all out. We have our starting left tackle, starting right tackle, both out. We have a tight end that got injured mid-game. And we have Herbert still probably playing through some of those fractured rib cartilage that's still trying to recover. So pretty much just hobbling out some guys that we found on the street at this point. I was telling my group chat, I was joking that Herbert is throwing to plumbers and cashiers and still keeping our season afloat. This is a tough 49ers team that just added Christian McCaffrey, and they have a crazy good run game. Somehow the Chargers defense, which is also very injured, put up a good fight. I mean, Staley, you got to credit him. He's put together a good game plan against this Niners team, and we held him to a reasonable amount of rushing yards and total points and everything, but that offense really couldn't do much, and the Charger fans seem to be looking at Joe Lombardi as a big cause of our offensive lack of performance. Obviously, injuries are equally or more to blame, but it's frustrating, man. I also have to put some of the blame on our GM, Tom Telesco. We didn't make any moves before the trade deadline. We knew that we had so many guys injured. There were guys we could have picked up, and we sat and watched as the other teams made some acquisitions. So very frustrating to see as a fan. I hope that we become more aggressive or change our management, because I don't like to sit around and watch as other teams improve and fix their problems, and we somehow think that we can solve them from within when that rarely ever actually happens. Let's get to something more positive. As a general NFL fan, if you're watching Vikings versus Bills this week, you have to appreciate that game. There were some crazy plays. You had Stephon Diggs going upstairs for a crazy one-handed catch. You had Justin Jefferson with a contested in traffic, fighting for the ball, one-handed snag, pins it against his hip on the way down, keeps that puppy off the ground. Oh, boys. That's got to be one of the best catches I've seen in the last couple of years. Late in the game, Vikings trying to, I believe, take the lead with a QB sneak at the goal line, end up getting stopped by the Bills. And so they turn it over on downs. Bills have it on the 1 yard line. Bills try to do a QB sneak of their own just to get some breathing room. Josh Allen fumbles the ball. And the ball's sitting around on the goal line. Vikings jump on it and recover for a touchdown. Holy smokes. I don't think I've ever seen that. And then the Bills get the ball back, trying to drive down the field. Ends up throwing Josh Allen throws a pick to Pat Pete, and the Vikings seal the game. They come back, they swoop in, and they grab it from the Bills. Kirk O'Chains, Kirk Thuggins, whatever you want to call him, gets the job done. Vikings move to 8-1. Crazy impressive season for them. My brother's a Vikings fan. He's going to be happy for this. And who knows, man? Vikings could be a force to be reckoned with. We just saw the Eagles fall to the Commanders. So those are two now, the two best record-wise teams in the NFL, I believe, is Vikings and Eagles. So pretty crazy, man. And you know what? I'm going to throw in a little extra something into sports here. I usually don't talk about this, but I watched a UFC match. It was Alex Pereira, the middleweight division here. Alex Pereira getting the upset TKO over Israel Adesanya, who was the champion at the time. Adesanya was controlling this fight for most of the way. He seemed to have Pereira on retreat, and he seemed to have control. And then late in the match. It was like either the last round or second to last round. Pereira had Adesanya back against the wall, against the octagon. He connected on a few punches, had his head bouncing a little, and then he just hit some combos on Adesanya. Right, left, left, boom, bam, bow. And it was just over in a flash. The judge, the ref, whatever you want to call him, came in and called it off, and Pereira walks out of there with the upset win. It was electric, and I obviously I don't have a whole lot of expertise in the UFC, but as a fan, I think it was pretty exciting. What's cooking in finance? Last week I told you guys about FTX starting to get into trouble a little bit with their balance sheet, with their liquidity. Things were just unfolding a week ago, and we were early on in the story, but there has been so much more going on ever since then, and I have the whole timeline here for you guys, the rise and fall of FTX. Let's take you through the most notable points of how FTX fell, and we'll kind of let you think for yourself and see what you conclude after I take you through this little timeline here. So FTX is a cryptocurrency exchange. It was founded by Sam Bankman-Fried in 2019. And this guy named Sam Bankman-Fried who created this, he also had a crypto trading firm, which was called Alameda Research. These two were supposed to be separate entities, but they kind of worked in partnership with each other and supported each other, and kind of had some suspicious interactions. So CoinDesk is a website that has articles about crypto. CoinDesk reported on Alameda's troubled balance sheet on November 2nd. They released this report that showed Alameda's balance sheet, and people seem to see that as a red flag, some of the things they saw in there. One of these red flags was its largest assets, which according to the report were billions of dollars worth of FTT, which is the exchange token for FTX. It's a crypto of its own. So then we have this guy named Changpeng Zhao. We're going to call him CZ for simplicity. This guy named CZ, he is the CEO of Binance, which is a rival exchange of FTX. So these two are competitors, FTX and Binance. So CZ tweeted on November 6th that he was planning to sell off Binance's stockpile of FTT, which is the exchange token of FTX. He was going to sell off everything that they had related to FTT because of the recent revelations that have came to light. And what he means by this is that CoinDesk report that came out and showed that Alameda had billions of dollars worth of FTT. CZ compared FTX's situation to the crash of Terra USD and Luna that happened earlier this year, and that tanked the crypto market and cost investors billions of dollars. So he drew his conclusions. He kind of saw some parallels there, how this could be similar to the Luna situation, and he wanted nothing to do with it. So Binance sold all their FTT. And what happens when you have a huge amount of one token and you sell a lot of it at once, as you flood the market with excess supply? And when you have a huge increase in supply, that means the price is going to go down because there's so much of it available that it's probably not going to be as valuable anymore. So CZ sells off all this FTT. The price of FTT starts to go down significantly. This was interesting that CZ tweeted out that he was doing this, because typically these kind of moves aren't really announced publicly. You just wait and see them on a balance sheet in the future, but he actually came out and tweeted this. So his announcement and his selling led to this rapid decline in FTT's value over the next day. Suspicion was growing that FTX didn't have the liquidity needed to back the transactions that they had on their exchange and stay afloat. The value of other coins, including Bitcoin and ETH, the top two by market cap, declined as well. Bitcoin was dropping to a 2-year low. We saw it come down into the upper 15,000 mark, and ETH was down around 1,100, I believe. Bankman-Fried, who is the CEO of FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, he said in a tweet Thursday that the platform saw $5 billion in withdrawals on November 6th. Whew! So CZ and Sam Bankman-Fried struck a deal. This is a deal that Binance was going to acquire the non-US branch of FTX. Binance was going to come in and kind of sign this non-binding letter of intent on November 8th, which is pretty much promising to bail out the failing exchange and prevent a larger market crash. However, when you read that it's a non-binding letter of intent, Binance can come in, look at the balance sheets, look at their financial situation, and they can decide to just back away completely if they don't like what they see. But pretty much they're going to do their due diligence. They're going to look and see if this is potential for them to acquire FTX, and we'll see how it goes. So CZ and Binance come on in, they look around, and they don't like what they see. Binance withdrew from the deal. Within a day, CZ posted on Twitter that Binance had completed its corporate due diligence and it would be not acquiring FTX. CZ also tweeted that the news reports of mishandled customer funds and alleged U.S. agency investigations contributed to this decision. And then we head over to November 8th. FTX halted all the non-fiat customer withdrawals. And then on Twitter, Sam Bankman-Fried posting a string of apologies, explaining FTX's liquidity issues and promising more transparency in the future, trying to cover up, trying to do damage control here. November 10th, 2 days later, FTX US posted a warning on its website for users on the login screen, noting that the trading may be halted on FTX US in the next few days. The message told users to close any positions they wanted to, and that withdrawals would remain open. So if you see your exchange saying, we might not be letting you withdraw in a few days, that is a huge red flag. You're going to want to hop in there and get all your crypto and all your money out of there ASAP. And that's what people did. Friday, November 11th, FTX announced that it had filed for voluntary Chapter 11 bankruptcy proceedings for FTX, FTX US, and Alameda Research. Chapter 11 bankruptcy is the one where you're allowed to kind of realign your company, reassess, and not completely liquidate everything. You can still remain operational, but you're not looking good. This is basically how I describe it. So FTX and FTX US wallets were emptied on Friday evening. So yeah, I guess this is an entirely separate thing. So we have all this going down. Their balance sheet fiasco, FTT crashes and everything. Everybody sells what they had and it's going terrible. It's looking bad. And then we have this happen. FTX and FTX US wallets were emptied on Friday evening in an apparent hack. More than 600 million was drained from the wallets, CoinDesk reported. A Twitter user reported that hackers were also attempting to access bank accounts linked to FTX US. So you have the downfall that already has taken place. Now you're having hackers swooping in, taking money, possibly accessing bank account information. And so we have FTX, which is currently under criminal investigation in the Bahamas, where the exchange is based. CoinDesk reports that Sam Bankman-Fried, the CEO of FTX, lived there with 9 colleagues, including on and off romantic partners who helped run his business. According to former FTX employees interviewed by CoinDesk, only this inner circle that lived in the Bahamas with him knew about the entangled finances of the companies. This hacker pulled more than 600 million from FTX on Friday, started moving those funds around on the blockchain this morning. And when I say this morning, I mean Tuesday, November 15th, I believe. So Yeah, that was recent. These funds are moving around, the 600 million. So the hacker converted these funds to stable coins DAI, D-A-I, and then from there they went to Ethereum. So this user that hacked FTX is now the 35th largest holder of Ethereum in the world, CoinDesk reported. That is insane. That is unbelievable what's going down in crypto. Cascade effects. One thing leads to another. Bada bing, bada boom. Mr. Worldwide as I step in the room. Things are going down and I'm yelling timber. This is not a situation that you want to see as a crypto investor. The coins are falling, the exchanges are falling. Thankfully, if you took my advice from a previous episode, you might have yourself some cold storage. That's what I have my crypto stored in, is cold storage. I would recommend you do some research, keep your crypto offline. That way, if all these exchanges come crashing down, your crypto is still safe. They cannot halt withdrawals from cold storage. You're off the grid, baby. You're locked and loaded. So please be safe out there in the Web3 world. Get yourself some cold storage, and hopefully we will learn from this. The industry will grow from this and become more secure in the future. What's cooking in technology? This one is pretty crazy and funny. New York City could pay people to snitch on illegally parked cars. This plan that was proposed would involve individuals providing photo or video evidence to the city. Any evidence provided would be investigated by the Department of Transportation to determine whether there was a cause to issue a ticket. Those who report cars that are blocking sidewalks or bike lanes or school entrances and exits could be rewarded. The proposed bill would provide 25% of a $175 parking ticket to the person that reported the infraction. Oh, what a concept. You are paying civilians to snitch on other people illegally parking. Take a picture with your phone and get the license plate and show where this person is illegally parking and submit it. I don't know if they plan on having an app to do this, if they plan on having a website to have like a Dropbox to send your submissions or something, but this is next gen snitching and you can make money off of it. This could be a possible stream of income for some people. I mean, 25% of a $175 parking ticket, so that's 1/4. If you take 1/4 of $200, that's $50. So a little bit less than $50, maybe talking in the neighborhood of $40 a pop. Boys, we eating good. If I'm finding some illegal parking people, I'm snitching. I'm getting my money. We're eating good tonight, boys. I don't know about you, but who knows if this will actually get implemented or not. I think it's hilarious. And it's thinking outside the box, using technology and crowdsourcing some police duties, I guess. But what do you guys think about this? Let me know. Are you in favor of paying people to snitch on illegally parked cars? Or do you think it should be not allowed? I don't know. I think it's kind of cool. So let me know. What's cooking in video games? Listen to the title of this article I found. Finally, a video game that lets you play as Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ has risen today in a video game. Oh, and you are Jesus Christ. The world's first Jesus simulator, it's called I Am Jesus Christ, allows gamers to slip into the sandals of the godlike Christian prophet and act out the New Testament's greatest hits. Sort of. As Jesus, players can use telekinesis to enhance their carpentry skills, charge up their Holy Spirit energy to perform miracles, invigorate a wedding reception by turning water into wine, teleport inside a sick child's bloodstream for healing, and avoid a ball of hellfire that is Satan in the desert. A boss fight against Satan? Sign me up. Performing such acts elicits joyous responses from the peasant folk. This wine is better than the wine we had before, they cry. Thank you, you saved the day. A prologue of the game will be available on Steam starting December 1st. The prologue is basically a free, shortened version of the game that takes place in ancient Nazareth. The full version will be implemented sometime in the first quarter of 2023, though some in the press have already played early demos. Vice reporter Matteo Lupetti noted the obvious. The game has ridiculously high meme potential. Guys, I am dying to play this game. I really want to go around in playing as Jesus, performing miracles, and doing all this fun stuff. I think that this is going to be great if it lives up to the potential. It's just, the possibilities are endless. I mean, you're Jesus. You could do anything, right? So who wouldn't want to play this? That would be so cool. Like, the story mode would be like you could play certain verses from the Bible. Like, imagine that's like a level is like all the situations and stuff that happened in the Bible you could like play in a video game. People would learn more about the Bible. They would learn more about Jesus, and they would have fun doing it. Shut up and take my money. I mean, where do I sign on the dotted line? I'm in. All right. That was fun. Hopefully you guys had some entertainment out of today's episode. We talked about the tennis GOAT conversation. We had some interesting and funny what's cooking topics. We might not have had a guest this week or any of the previous 3 weeks, but I'm sure that we'll get one soon. It's only a matter of time, guys. Scheduling is getting tough in the holiday season, and people are busy, but one way or another, I will keep pumping out this content for you guys. Hopefully you have fun listening, because I'm having fun making them. So, what's_cooking on Twitter, what's_cooking on Instagram. Follow me on YouTube, hit up my Facebook page. You know the drill by now. Thank you all for listening. We will see you next Wednesday.
See ya!